A customer came to me and asked if I wanted to paint a model kit for him in order for him to finish it. So just to be very clear, I will not be building this kit. I will not be making any more videos on it either. This is the only video and this is all I'm going to do. After I finish the paint job, I will hand it back to the customer and he will finish it. I firstly started with prepping the body, scribing out some of the panel lines to make them a bit deeper and also a bit wider. Once all those panel lines were now nicely scribed out, deeper and widened, I could move on to marking off all of the mold lines. Mold lines are not supposed to be there. I marked them off with a permanent marker so I have a visual on where they are, and the permanent marker also acts as a guide coat. Once I start sanding them down with the sanding sticks, the guide coat or the permanent marker starts to disappear, and once that is gone, so should the mold line be as well. After removing all of the mold lines, I could move on to smoothing the body out with some 600 grit sandpaper to give it a bit of a cleaner look and remove sharp edges, and also give it a bit of a key for the primer to stick to it a lot better. Once the body was sanded down and cleaned up, I moved it into the spray booth, starting on the hard to reach easy to forget spots with a first light coat of primer, and then moving on to the rest of the body. The body and all the separate body parts were a bit more than the usual kit I do, so I needed a quick refill during this coat. I refilled the airbrush and then moved on to finishing this coat off. With the first coat now applied to all the parts that needed primer, I let it sit for about 5 minutes, filled up the airbrush, and moved on to a second coat in similar fashion to the first. After applying the second coat of primer, I set the body and all the separate body parts and pieces aside for about an hour to dry, then moved on to sanding it smooth with some 3000 grit sanding sponges. This is to get rid of any of the orange peel imperfections or maybe even some dust that might have fallen into the primer and get it as smooth as I possibly can for the color to go onto it. The dust was removed from the body, the paint was stirred up and poured into the airbrush to start on the hard to reach easy to forget spots, and then of course a coat on the rest of the body and all the separate pieces as well. After about 10 minutes of time to dry up, I moved on to a second coat, and again after the second coat another 10 minutes have passed to apply the third and final coat of black. The third and final coat of black was now applied, so I let it sit and dry for about 25 minutes, then started mixing up the clear coat and applying that clear to the body as well. The first coat is applied, it's already looking pretty good, so 5 minutes in between to cure, and then the second and final coat is applied as well.